Hello. Thanks for taking some time to review the full feature demonstration of the Take Up Slack software solution intended to capture flightline management activity and other day-to-day activities at gliding clubs. This was recorded on April 26th using version 13.2 of the Take Up Slack software. My name's Patrick McMahon. The agenda that I'm going to cover today is a little bit kind of asynchronous to how we've done this before. We'll give a brief introduction about who we are and what Take Up Slack hopes to accomplish. We'll go through the configuration first, and then go through some demonstrations from the perspective of your typical member that will really just be interacting with the core features of Take Up Slack. That's requesting flights, launching and landing gliders, reviewing their logs and their financial account, and setting up emergency contacts and reviewing the membership directory. We'll close with just a summary of the treasurer functions and really dig into the accounting consequences of the examples that we'll go through. We've created a little company in 2019, really with the focus of helping gliding clubs. Our first product that we put out was called the Proving Grounds, and it's really intended to support gliding clubs, help glider pilots turn into soaring pilots, and address the primary concern of retention. We believe that once glider pilots get the taste of cross-country soaring, they become long-term soaring pilots. And we now have installations of proving grounds at about 60 gliding clubs around the world. And it is fully supported by the Soaring Association of America in America and the Soaring Association of Canada in Canada. And we thank those two organizations for their support and their belief in the platform. Take a Molly Mock Software, our little company, is made by and for glider pilots. Casey Brown is our software architect, a relatively new glider pilot. Christopher Goff is a long-term gliding pilot. He's a third-generation Diamond recipient, and he really does a lot of work for us on the Proving Grounds product, especially getting tasks configured. My name's Patrick McMahon. I've been gliding for about 20 years or so, and I've been on the volunteer boards of my respective gliding clubs for about 15 years. So I'm quite familiar with the challenges from an operations and sustainability of the gliding clubs, mostly from a financial perspective. And we're really excited about Take Up Slack, myself especially, for the lightened load that it can provide to the club administration from a day-to-day management perspective, providing greater service to members and greater clarity to the board and less work, less hours spent for the treasurer. Interesting segue there. So, kind of asking the question, what is Take Up Slack? It's a mobile optimized web application and it's designed to record the day-to-day activities and financial consequences of gliding clubs. From an operations perspective, it captures flight requests, glider movements, the issuance and redemption of intros, provides a consolidated view of flight logs for journey log entries or personal log entries. It provides members self-service opportunities to review their account activity. You can bill social events and incidental charges quite easily to member accounts. It's a central store with easy access to emergency contacts and provides privacy-considered membership directory features. It's configurable and fairly flexible as far as glider launch types. Fixed or variable launch types are available. You can define your launch and glider fleet, whether that's tow planes or winches, and you can manage permissions and roles. So tow pilots have special permissions, instructors, administrative permissions. It fully manages intros, issuance, redemption, cancellation, and refund, and you can write down that intro account. It'll flag expiring intros for you so you can get rid of that Excel tracker that's sometimes difficult to navigate on the flight line. And you can define minimum account settings to either to warn members that, hey, your account's getting low, you need to add some funds, or restrict the ability to submit new flight requests. You can keep that balance positive for members so they can't overdraw their account, or you can set a minimum, say minus $1,000 or whatever you choose if you're accustomed to running a gliding club where typically members owe you money instead of the club owing members money. It also provides powerful reporting, so you can simplify your bookkeeping activities by monitoring and to a transaction level your member accounts, the intro liability account. If you're in a sales tax jurisdiction, you can track your sales tax incidents as that accumulates. It makes it easy to reconcile payments by payment method. You can review member revenue based on um, revenue or the liability counts, and you can export your operational and transaction data for analysis or for your own safekeeping. I should say on the reporting and a bookkeeping side, and having spoken with a number of bookkeepers as we've developed this product, this should not expect to move every transaction into your accounting software. But when you're reconciling a period, you might say, our intro liability had a starting balance of $1,000. We sold another $500 worth of intros and redeemed $250 worth of intros. And the ending balance of our intro liability count is $1,250 in that example. There are some kind of basics that are worth highlighting here, and they represent a pretty significant change of reference or change of perspective on the gliding operation. So here we're building accounting as a consequence of recording flying activity. So when you put people into aircraft and they take a specific launch and they're billed for that launch and they might be billed dollar per minute for use of the aircraft, tracking the launching and the landing of those gliders with the correct crew inside will generate a bunch of transactions in the background. There's no supplemental work to generate the accounting transactions. It's a consequence of recording the flying activity. This is a mobile optimized smartphone app, and it's available on any internet connected device. So that's a computer, a tablet, or a phone, whatever is most convenient for your user. That also means it can be multiple devices on a flight line at a time. If larger clubs have a dedicated timekeeper, they can retain that function and they can be solely responsible for the launching and landing of the gliders, even defining crew. If you wanted to democratize those responsibilities to all members, you can do that. And we have this mantra of do or delegate. So for specific functions, someone's responsible either to do that action or to delegate it. For example, pilots are responsible to put themselves in aircraft personally or to delegate that to someone else. The person that runs the wing is responsible to launch the glider, either to do it or to delegate it. And if you retrieve the glider, it's your responsibility to land it in the app, whether you do that or delegate that responsibility. But we just know who is responsible for those actions. Whether they do them or not is not really critical, just as long as they're responsible for getting them done. The solution is supported by data, and it provides tables for reconciliation and data export for analysis and safekeeping. We don't want to handcuff your data. It's your data. We understand how important it is. And if you find a better solution than Take Up Slack and want to move to it, that data is available for you to pull out of Take Up Slack. We really are trying to serve the gliding community. So the first phase of our agenda here is going to be configuration. And so we're going to go through some of the day-to-day services offered by your gliding club through the setup. The first part of Take Up Slack is getting it to look like your gliding club. And there's a number of ways we're going to run through doing that. So here's the Take Up Slack app just on the side here. This is the view of an administrator. So my user permissions right now are that of an administrator. And for these functions, the configuration options, as we've kind of labeled there, I'm going to go into the back office and the admin button. So here we'll see a number of ways, a number of aspects of the gliding club that we can manage. We have pilots that are going to be in active or inactive status, and we'll come back to that as we dig into this. We have our gliders, so these are gliders that are already defined, or the ability to add new gliders. Similarly, for launches, this is a variable release launch. For our launch vehicles, in this case, a tow plane, and our intros that we would sell to the public. There's also specific options for intro management that we'll develop, and this is also where the club data is exported. This view requires an admin permission. And if I just open up an example here, under permissions or qualifications, we can see the admin checkbox. That would have to be checked for a user to have this view of the admin section. So the first thing we're going to do here is get some pilots set up in this instance. A little conflict of interest here, but I'm going to go into my own account and I'm going to make an e-transfer deposit of $120. I'm sorry, the transaction reference here might come from the banking app and it'll be $120. And I'm going to hit submit for my own account. And I have a few members that I'm just going to do this for real quick. Um, the next one is our friend Casey Test Brown. So we're going to add some money by e-transfer, also a popular payment method here in Canada, with $250 on his account. Who else do we have to add? Chuck Yeager, we're going to add some money to their account. This time we're going to go by Venmo. I don't know what the hash things look like for that, but we'll put $300 on Chuck's account. Worth highlighting here, Take Up Slack at no point holds the money. It is merely a reflection of the member's account with the club. So if the treasurer processed a payment from this next example, Chris Goff, paid by check, and it was check number 03736 for $450. Take Up Slack hasn't touched any of that money, but presumably the club would say we have cash in of $450. Our obligation to our member has increased by $450 a credit, and the similar accounting is taking place here. We're recording payments in and adding a credit to the liability account, what we call the member liability. There's a few members here that aren't active. So Alexander Schleicher, we're going to add some funds to their account. Um, and we're also going to move down. So we're going to submit this, the funds edition, but we're also going to change some qualifications here. So we see that they're logged as a tow pilot, um, that we don't want them to have flat rate rental. They're activating for the year, but we do want them to expire at the end of 2024. Let's assume the membership year is January 1st to March 31st. So we've set this auto expiry. So if you have a large club, there's no task toward the end of a flying year of going in and deactivating members. You can renew them for a season or for a contest, and the active status will lapse once that time elapses. And then as you process new membership applications at the start of the flying year, you can renew their active status and set a new expiry date. So we've added some funds, we've activated them. I'm just going to save the changes here. And here you can see the Venmo deposit of $280. The current balance, $280. Some more members here that we're going to want to do. So we're going to go with the glider manufacturers. I hope you can see that drop down. Let's say that Roland Schneider is paying by check and it's $500. We're going to add those funds and we also need to make them active. Now let's assume they're just here for a short period of time, um, maybe till the end of May. So we'll activate them just for a short period of time. Here we see the deposit, current balance $500. Save those changes. The brothers John. And you can quickly filter to all your members by just starting to type and get the short list there. Paid by could do pay by expense, for instance. It might not have a transaction reference. Say it's $300 and fuel for tractor. So we've added those funds and we also want to activate this member for the year. So we'll save those changes. And one more, good friends at DG. We have an inactive pilot here. We're going to do another pay by expense just so we have a few transactions um, by these payment methods. And we'll say this is marketing. We'll come back to this record expenses. This is where you'd bill for barbecues and incidentals, but we want to we see there's an instructor and a tow pilot, and we'd like to activate them again, expiring at the end of this gliding season. So we'll save those changes. I'll just come back real quick to a member and just talk a little bit about some of the qualifications. So members that have the tow pilot checkbox, and you can see a summary of all the changes that are set to be made here in the qualifications. Those users only will be available in drop downs to assign to tow aircraft or launch vehicles. Admin, we talked about having the full view. This is the master permission. You can enable members to process funds in. So if you had accounting support by someone that was processing inbound funds, they could be limited to adding funds to account only. If you had an intro coordinator, you could provide them the specific opportunity to add intro certificates to the club. If you were managing a contest or something, it had a number of gliders coming in, the contest manager might be given the can update gliders permission to add gliders as those contest registrants are added to the club or they register for the contest. The edit the flight logs. There are some organizations that we're working with that say toll pilots and instructors have the opportunity to edit flights. So you can manage that specific function. Flat rate rental means that members don't pay on a per minute basis if they're flying in a glider that does carry a rental rate. Active, we've already talked about that, and then the automatic expiration. So that's really the user management, setting your members up to be flying at the gliding club. You can, as I said, add funds. You can add incidental charges to them that you'll define, and you can manage their permissions. Next, we want to fly some gliders. So here we have some existing gliders that are already defined. If you care to input the launch speed, if there were a dollar per minute cost for, say, a club glider, you could do that. And I'm going to just spend a bit of time here talking about these tax statuses. They're going to come up on a number of different revenue items. Tax exempt means there's no tax implication. You're in a jurisdiction without a sales or excise tax. Tax inclusive would say if I said this was 105 per minute, that might assume that I get a dollar per minute of revenue and a 5 cent GST, or that's the Canadian sales tax, goods and services tax for the country here. Um, so the 105 would be a dollar per minute in rental revenue and 5 cents per minute in tax revenue. And we would be talking about the prices that are incurred by members. If I wanted to end up at the same position, I could hit tax exclusive and add the GST there. So now, as the fees are incurred, 5% GST will be added to the $1 per minute. So it really depends on how you talk about your prices. If I'll give an example, my gliding club, we say our intros are $175, but that's tax exclusive, and the members of the public end up paying $183.75, I think. Whereas we would tell our members that a tow to 2,000 feet is $45, but that includes tax. So you can define the tax inclusive or exclusive incidents at your discretion. And if there's no tax, you just hit tax exempt. The taxes are defined by you. So depending if you have a tourism tax, if you have a state tax, or if you had a value added tax or anything like that, those will all be defined through the setup of your organization. This is going to carry nothing. It's actually my glider, one seat, and it's ready to be used. If this was a glider that came into a club for a contest but then left, you might save it as not ready, and it won't be available for members to choose when they're requesting their own flights. But I haven't made any changes to this that I want to keep. And I'm just going to add one new glider to the instance. And you see this warning here, registration cannot be changed once entered. So we really do want to think about defining the how you set up the glider. So since they're going to be in drop downs, we really do recommend competition ID, dash, and registration. So you're not confused by all the N registered gliders or G registered gliders or C registered gliders. But yeah, you could again change the launch speed and the rate and the number of seats and set this to be ready so it's available to be called by people that are requesting flights. I'm just going to go in to show this is the DG-1000 of the U.S. Air Force. So this has a rental rate. Let's consider this a rental aircraft. It's tax exempt, so there's no sales tax on it. But we might actually change that to now include GST, and the $2.25 includes GST, the 5% tax. It's a two-seat airplane, so it'll be available in drop downs for instructor flights, friend flights, intro flights, and flights with other members, whereas single seaters would not be in those lists. And we're going to save those changes with the modification of the tax incidents and the applicable tax to be charged, the summary there. So that is a review of setting up gliders and reviewing gliders and monitoring changes to gliders. If in the next year you change the rental rate from 250 to 265, you could just come in and update your rental rates on that glider. You don't have to delete it and resubmit it. Launches are also a critically important aspect of the gliding club. Here we have a hook up and go launch. I'm just going to bring it up first and have to make my screen a bit wider. So we have two types of launch, fixed and variable. Um, a hook up and go might say that there's maybe a $12.50 hookup charge. From the first 1,000 feet, you'll pay 25 cents per 1,000 feet. So not too much there. The next 1,000 to 3,000 feet, those next 2,000 feet, $1.08 per 100 feet, and so on and so forth. If you want it to be granular, you could be granular to single foot. And if you find that you've overlapped, we're not going to let you have ranges that overlap. So we'll throw some errors there for you. We do have the same feet, but that's is what it is. You can consider this in time as well. It says feet here, but if you had a variable per minute charge, you may say, 0 to 1,000 is, I don't know, 0.6 cents per minute or something like that, or 60 cents per minute, whatever it might be. And you just kind of have to do a little bit of a mind flip right now that you're not dealing with variable height, but in fact dealing with variable time. So that is accommodated, and we'll look to improve that functionality over time. This is scalable at your discretion, and you can define the rates at which you're billing individuals on these fixed, or this is a variable launch type. So hopefully it's sufficient flexibility if you are dealing with variable height or um, variable time. And we can talk about whether you are radioing down release times or heights, or if the tow pilot's tracking that in the cockpit and then reconciling at the end. Both of those can be accommodated in how we start executing launches and landings. So I'm going to just save my change where I've added the connection cost there. And then we're going to do another more simple addition. So in a fixed type launch, we're going to call this the 2,000-foot launch. Let's say that it's $35 and we expect to go to 2,000 feet. European clubs will have the unit of height set to meters, so that's kind of a global setting through setup. And we're going to say that this is tax inclusive with GST. So we'll just save those changes. And I'm going to add one more that we like to do for like maybe an intro flight. So 3,000 feet, and we're going to send that to, I don't know, 40, let's say $50. Expect, oops, uh-oh, hit back. So I can make the screen a little bit smaller. Just to highlight, this is kind of like phone size. Um, so launch label to start this over again, 3,000. I think we said $50, $55. Expect this to go to 3,000 feet, 300 meters. Again, feet meters will be changed depending on your, and let's make this tax exempt or tax exclusive. So we're going to add the GST to this one. I don't know if we're going to go that far into details on the specific transactions, but just to have some variability in the configuration. So I'll save those changes once we've set that one up. And I think that pretty much defines the launches that we want to have available. Oh boy. I'm gonna add maybe one more. So we often hear about a pattern practice. So a variable height, and that's, I don't know, $15, 12.50. And we'll say it's tax exempt. It's 1,000 feet. I don't know. But yeah, so now I've got those four heights types of launches listed. 2,000, 3,000, hook up and go, and a pattern launch. The next one we're going to do is our tugs. So we have one C-registered tug in the system already. So the registration, the type of tow plane it is, how many seats. We're going to change this to ready. We want to have it to be available. Generally, most clubs are leaving tow planes as ready all the time. It's not kind of a day-by-day thing, but if it did go down for maintenance for an extended period of time, or if it was just visiting, that's where you might change the ready, not ready status. And then we're going to add one more type of tug. And you may want, just to make it easy to find tugs, if you have a common name for them, especially if you're thinking about a busy flight line, that a glider lined up between white top or stripes, whatever you might have. You may say, um, you can kind of configure that as you'd like. One seat Pawnee, and we'll say this tow plane is ready as well. So we've added a tow plane called yellow. That one's pretty straightforward. Oh, and I think I skipped one here. So this is the launch vehicles that we've just gone through, and I'll just bring one up here, the one that we just created. So we named the registration yellow, and it can't change. In the aircraft type, I have the registration and the name just to use a cute name, a common name, number of seats, and status. A little bit ahead of myself on the presentation. Next is the configuring the intro. So you likely have some pretty common intro offerings, whether it's a midweek, a weekend, an aerobatic, a 3000, a 4000. But here we have one flight configured, the demo flight. We have $155 that's communicated as price in tax inclusive. It's using the 3,000 foot tow height. Um, and mentions the tax. So pretty straightforward there. We'll create one more, and we're going to call this the donation intro. And let's say that's $55. And it includes just GST. And that's set up now. So as you issue intros, you can issue one of the two common types of intros that we're using as an example in here. And this is the launch type we expect here is going to be 2,000 feet. Um, and we'll just save those changes. And the price and the tax status can be overridden on issuance. That's really just setting up the standard product that the club might be offering. This is going to be an important just segue from configuration because we want to actually have some intros for the member examples about how to kind of live life on the flight line. So with those with the add intro certificates permission or someone with an admin permission, we can issue intros here on this new intro flight. So when we pull that up, we're going to get our two intros that we have defined. So let's use a demo flight. We're going to issue a few of these just so that we get that rolling. $155, it includes tax. The payment method we received from this person was Venmo. Payment reference was whatever. And it was sold to Dolly Parton. Dolly at noemail.com. And for argument's sake here, we'll just say that the passenger will be the same as the buyer. You'll be able to modify the passenger name when redeeming the intro flight so that your records are complete. Happy birthday. If your club has a naming convention that you'd like to maintain, you can overwrite the serial number that's automatically generated, and you can put that there. Today's date is the purchase date, and we have a setting for an expiration date set to 730 days from now, which is 2 years from now. If we wanted to override that, we can certainly override it. To a year. So again, it's an editable field, but it is defaulted to the standard setting. So we're going to add this intro. We want to just confirm a demo flight to Dolly Parton of $155, and we'll hit submit. And we'll just do one more here. And this one paid by e-transfer. Again, just have a little hash here, Garth Brooks. Entry star at test.com. Again, we'll assume it's the same purchaser as good luck on your tour. You don't have to do that. I don't even know why I'm doing it, but I did. Again, serial. Oh, shoot. Keep hitting back instead of highlight. So we're doing a demo flight just by e-transfer. Garth Brooks. What is it, Garth? I didn't at test.com. Same as buyer. And we're going to say that in this case, 24002 now. And we'll leave those settings here. So if you sold this a couple days ago, you can go in and say, oh, we missed the payment. So, and then automatically update the expiration date to 2 years from the date of purchase. but we'll put this one in and have the confirmation, and we're going to do one more donation intro, and this will be paid by Venmo. Now, if the donation ended up being zero, the zero is going to have no transaction record, like there will be no money in the intro AP, there will be no payment in, which is fine. But let's just do this because it's a donation to a charity, and this is to Friends of Country Music. I'm sure that exists. And then this is admin at countrymusic.com. I apologize to admin at countrymusic.com. We'll say again, we don't know who's actually going to get this for a fundraiser or what have you, so we'll update the crew when that becomes, and we might make the note annual fundraiser silent auction. Serial number, let's just leave the standard serial number, doesn't matter. And that expires in 2 years and it was processed today. So we've added three intro flights, two purchased and one donated. And that's kind of how you would do that. So as you process the payment, now it's in Take Up Slack. You don't have to add it to an Excel spreadsheet. It's in the system. The accounting's been managed in Take Up Slack. Redemption will be managed in Take Up Slack, and we'll show you the various ways you can recall those intro flights as members or as guests redeem them at the field. Okay, so phase two here is really going to focus on how members are going to use the Take Up Slack app on a day-to-day basis. Their responsibilities to the Gliding Club are not as intense as an administrator or the treasurer, and so their experience is more constrained. The first one deals with registration, and it's worth highlighting that while no one has an obligation to use the app, an account is required so that individuals can be correctly allocated to gliders for their financial account and for their log keeping requirements. But if the user is resistant to change, if they don't have a smartphone, if they don't carry data, they are not required to use the app at the flight line, but they are required to create an account. So users will navigate to takeupslack.com. They'll hit the sign up button and they'll use their email address as their username. Uh, One username will work at all clubs that are using Take Up Slack, so you don't have to create individual accounts if you fly at more than one gliding club or gliding site. So they'll sign up using their email, their first name, last name, set a password, and then hit the sign up button. This will email them a verification code quite promptly, and they're going to copy that verification code and go back to takeupslack.com to input the confirmation code and then hit verify. At this point, they're going to see this screen, which says your account does not have an active club. Please go to settings and request membership at a club and select the club as your active club. In this case, a little fuzzy here, but when you hit settings, you get to this screen and there's a button at the bottom that says request membership at club. If you hit that, you can filter down to the test club for this example or your gliding club. And that's how members will move into the inactive status in your club. And then an administrator there will activate them as they process their member application and payments. Once you click here, you get a little pop-up says, do you wish to request active membership at Test Club for exploration? And hit OK. So if you're unlikely to recall how busy the app looked a few moments ago, I've in the background removed my admin permissions. So now my view as a typical member includes gliding functions, the ability to request a flight, record launches and landings. I can support with tow pilot functions here and see a list of any gliders in the queue. I can review flight logs, see my financial account, and then update or review emergency contacts or the membership directory. Things in the back office are not visible, and I can see that my account balance currently stands at $120. And you can configure a message. So many gliding clubs say, please remit payment by Thursdays to a Venmo or e-transfer address, what have you. But that's a configurable setting through onboarding. The most common thing we're going to see members want to do here is to request a flight. And we've created a few scenarios here for me to walk through some examples of how Take Up Slack can accommodate different types of flight requests. So the first one is the most straightforward. You see that my username is selected as the pilot in context. I'm going to be flying alone, and I want to choose my glider, Echo Hotel, and I'd like to take a 3,000 foot launch with that. So now I've defined who I am, what type of flight I am, what glider I'm in, and the type of launch that I'd like to take. And I can place that on the flight line, and I'm prompted with a little dialog box to confirm that flight request. My next flight is for my colleague Casey Brown, and he's going to take an instructional flight. So, but he forgot his phone. So Casey has asked me to create a flight request for him, and I'm going to go down to Casey Brown, and he's going to be taking an instructional flight. And we're going to choose Roland Schneider as the instructor for this flight. Pilot in command, of course, is the instructor. The glider they're using is November India Mike. And this is going to be a variable release height takeoff. And with that all defined, we're going to place that on the flight line. So Casey didn't bring a smartphone, doesn't have data, is resistant to change. We can still get him and the right crew to find in an aircraft. We're going to have Chris is going to redeem an intro. So again, Chris forgot his phone or doesn't have data. And we have our intro button here. So you can start searching for serial number, name, email address, name of a guest, anything like that. So we have Dolly Parton. We have Garth Brooks. We had the admin at Friends of Country Music. 24001 is the serial number. So there's a variety of ways for you to filter from the available intros. If an intro were expired, it would be shaded in yellow to draw your attention to it. Say, hey, this is expired, and it'll be up to the club if you'd like to redeem that or not. So we're gonna choose this Dolly Parton email, and if it actually wasn't Dolly Parton that came out and it was someone she knows named Judy, then we can update the crew so you have visibility there. The glider we're going to use in this case is Zulu Whiskey, and we cannot choose a launch type because it was defined on the purchase of the intro, and we'll place that on the flight line. The last example is going to be for Alexander Schleicher is going to fly with another member. This member will be Brothers Jonkers, and we can decide who's the pilot in command here. We'll keep it as Alexander Schleicher, and these two will split the flight cost. They're going to share the flight expense, and the glider that they'll fly in is 3 Alpha Tango, and they're going to take that on a variable release height launch. So we'll place that on the flight line. The next thing to do is to launch a glider, right? We've built this queue of gliders, and I should maybe just highlight that I have an active flight for my user. I'm in Echo Hotel. But the next action, once the crews are defined, I've put my parachute on, done my walk around, done my daily inspection, of course, all of that stuff. And we can see a number of gliders ready to go on the flight line. Notice here that I made the flight for Casey, I made the flight for Alexander Schleicher, I made the flight for myself, and I made the flight for Chris Goff. But Chuck Y, I did not make that flight. That was another user that was using the solution, and they made their own flight request. So this screen reads like Casey was launched by Yellow Top 5 minutes ago or at this very second. But here you notice that we don't have a tow pilot defined, so we don't have access to the launch button. So first we're going to add a tow pilot to tow plane. And we'll do this one. And I maybe should just point out here, if you wanted to record Hobbs time, if you just wanted to check pilots out, this is a good practice as you're establishing a culture with Take Up Slack, is that tow pilots check in and check out. If you wanted to log fuel, you can. It's not required, but you can start to maybe get a little bit more idea here. If you had Hobbs time and fuel per fuel, you could start to say, what's our average fuel per hour consumption? How many feet of climb is the tow plane doing on so many liters or gallons of fuel, etc. And if you wanted to log Hobbs time on an oil change, you can start to keep track about how long it's been since the last oil change. You likely have processes for this on the tow plane side already. It's there if you'd like to use it. Not many clubs are using it, to be honest, at this point. And this can be done by any member. So if a tow pilot grabs a tech-savvy member and helps with the oil change, they could put this into the system, but it's not required. So going back to the launching a glider function. So we now have a tow pilot and we can start to launch some of these gliders. I'm going to cheat a little bit just to get some time in the air here. But let's say that Casey went first and he went 3 hours ago. Nice flight 937 launch on a Friday here where I'm at. And we're going to hit launch. I saw Casey go and I was anxious to go myself. And so I launched 172 minutes ago, which is 8 minutes after Casey went. If it turns out that Chuck actually launched before Casey, we can move them around. The order doesn't necessarily matter. And if we see that actually I had not launched at all, we can just undo that launch. If there was a mistake, if the wrong glider was launched, we can put them back on the flight line. Christopher and his intro, they went 140 minutes ago, or let's say they went 35 minutes ago on an intro flight, put them in the air. And then we have this shared flight. And oh my goodness, keep hitting back. Um, that went 144 minutes ago. And you can also use the slider if you wanted to. It is relative to the current time, but you can see that you do have the time in that context there. So if you wanted to match to like a OGN record or IGC record, you can do that if you had to do it quite long after the fact. But we'll just put that in here and launch them. And then we're gonna put me in the air. And almost went back again. 2 minutes ago, just making stuff up here. And if we wanted to undo a flight totally, so let's say maybe I'll do my own flight because I can put it back on the line quite easily. If I say I don't want to fly, then I can remove it from the flight line, and that will clear the crew and everything out of the flight. Now, if I get my stuff together, I forgot my water bottle, I can easily put myself back on the flight line and then go back to the launch screen and I can launch that glider when it launched. So that's really how a timekeeper or the person running the wing can I'm just going to unlaunch Christopher again just to kind of show the example. So if I ran the wing for Christopher, which I can't because I'm in the air, but you get the idea. I say Christopher launched. Behind it will default if there's only one. You have to select if there's multiples. 9 minutes ago, and I hit the launch button. You'll see the two variable release height launches are undefined. So those launched, and then we need to close the gap on what release they actually went to. By clicking the yellow button, you're prompted to input it right away. And you can, so it was 2,600 feet. We can submit it, and we'll see that the release height button's gone away. So that's kind of how people will manage the launch. And if you're radioing down release altitudes, how they can record the release height in real time just to keep all the records correct. Landing a glider is similar, a little bit more straightforward. This shows you all the gliders in the air. This list also shows you all the gliders in the air. So as the day finishes up, let's say, for example, Chris finishes his intro. He lands right now, 9-minute intro. We'll see that Chris is no longer flights in progress. And he's not a glider that we can choose to land. It's a landed flight. Now, if we landed Chris by accident, we can click on this flight record and we can put that flight back in the air. It turns out that it was actually me that just landed. So we'll put that flight down. We can land this flight. And if we wanted to undo a launch and put that back on the flight line, we can do that here from as well, but that's likely to be a rarely used feature. Again, we can use the slider for defining time, which is geometric. 20 minutes ago, Chuck Yeager landed in Mike Romeo, and Casey landed in um, November New Mike. And notice the release height is still here. There's still this glaring in your face opportunity to complete the data. And I'm still not going to do that. Let's assume that we're in a gliding club where tow pilots are tracking release heights on their thigh. Um, Casey has left and come back before the tow pilots had an opportunity to correct the records, because we want to show you also where this is going to be glaringly obvious to users that the record is incomplete. So let's land this last glider. Um, and then I'm just going to very quickly request another flight for myself in NIM just to show you an example. And I maybe should highlight it. Actually, and I think this doesn't show up on the screen. But your gliders will be organized by recently used. So if there's a lot of gliders at the fleet, the ones that you are regularly getting into, they will have they'll come to the top of that list. And just notice here, so I have a warning on my account that I'm low funds. I can still place my flight on the flight line. That button is available to me, but I am getting a notice that I have to acknowledge when I hit that button that my account is running a little bit low on funds. So I'm just going to put this in just so we have multiple flights on one of the gliders um, for the just for one of the features on the pilot log review. You can cheat like that if it lands in the future. Okay, so I think that really summarizes launching and landing. So our recommendation is the glider, the person that retrieves the glider is responsible for landing it. That's do or delegate. The person that runs the wing is responsible for launching it. That's do or delegate. And those are the main functions that members are going to use: requesting a flight, launching and landing gliders. Flight logs is the next main feature after a day of flying. If we hit the flight logs, this will show us all of the activity that's taken place at the flying club for the day. I'm just going to expand this quickly to show the full table. And we can see that this second flight is a variable release height flight, and it still doesn't have a defined release in the record. So it's trying to be glaringly obvious that there's missing information here. So it's easy here to filter by aircraft. I can see just filter to Echo Hotel, the fourth flight of the day. And I did those two flights in Zulu Whiskey, so there's two records in Zulu Whiskey. We can also filter by tow pilot. All of the tows in this case were done by our friend DG. If there were multiple tow planes, then we would be able to do multiple tow pilots. You would see that, and then also be able to filter by tow pilot to see who's done the tows for the day and what those tows were. You can set date ranges. There's only data for today. So, but if you want to see monthly activity, yearly activity, this is a good way to get a kind of cursory idea about how many flights you've done and the breakdown on time for intros and number of intros, time for instructional and number of instructional. And then in the My Flights button, in this case, this is the only case where I'll see the cost. So I incurred $55 cost for both of those launches, but I didn't incur any rental costs. But in the all flight record, I don't see costs. So I'm not the cost to another member's account are not visible to all members. Only in the context of my flight can I see how much flying today cost me, which is $110. It's worth highlighting now that I think because I only put $120 on my account, I might not be able to take another flight. So if I want to fly alone in Echo Hotel to 3,000 feet, the button to request that flight is not available because I violated the club's restricted setting for account values. So there's an internal control that prevents the treasurer from having to chase members down to pay their accounts, which is not a very fun task for treasurers to do. Also on the flight logs, we have a revision history. So I'm actually going to go in real quickly and edit a flight on another screen. I'm going to edit this own flight and change it from 3,000 to 2,000, save. Okay. Okay, cool. So users also have the opportunity to review the details of the flight. Only those with an edit flight permission can modify the flight, but you can see revisions, the date, who made the revision, what was changed, and if there was a cost implication. I have changed the permissions on this user, so the edit flight functionality is available, and all portions of the flight can be changed. Um, Flight height, flight name, aircraft can be changed to make sure that the records are accurate, unless the flight's been locked, and we'll talk about that in the accounting section. Members can also review their account summary. This is a summary of their financial account. So on today's activity, I had a start of day balance of zero. I deposited $120. I requested and then canceled a flight. So we see the original request and then it getting undone. Um, Again, requested and undid, and then requested and completed and requested and completed. So there's a lot of data being recorded, but the end of my day balance went for, well, start of day started at zero. I deposited $120 and then I incurred some costs to uh, bring my balance down to $4.50, which is why I'm seeing the low funds error. Actually, I can't even request a flight anymore with the current restrictions on this club or the configuration of this club. So members have their own self-service opportunities on the club, including deposits. If we charged incidental fees, barbecues, hats, oxygen fills, those kinds of things, they would all show up in the accounting summary. So the treasurer doesn't have to generate that report if a member wants to know. That's a lot of time treasurers spend on generating those reports, and there's a lot of members that don't ask because they don't want to inconvenience the treasurer. So it's kind of a lose-lose scenario in most existing gliding clubs. The last function that all members have access to is the emergency contacts directory. So having emergency contacts at your fingertips is important. Um, and also the membership directory on a single Excel spreadsheet is not terribly respectful to members' privacy considerations. So Take Up Slack has tried to move the membership directory functions into the app, so you can very easily, in the event that it's necessary, identify um, if a pilot has a tracking information, so a spot, for instance, what their emergency contact is, and what personal information they've chosen to make available, some or none. So in the case of Chuck Yeager here, he's prepared to share his phone number and of course the emergency contact and his tracking link, but not anything more than that. If I go back into my own user, I can update my personal information. I can add a tracking link and a description. I can update my emergency contact, and I can choose what of my information is available, in this case, just my phone number. So yeah, privacy considered and at your fingertips, one by one, emergency contact and user directory. So that's the end of the user functions, the core functionality of using Take Up Slack for most members. I'm gonna now go into the kind of behind the scenes, definitely back office, some of the value that Take Up Slack can provide to accountants or treasurers. So these permissions require an edit permission. Um, and we'll just kind of quickly go back to the flight logs here. So I'm just going to reload actually my instance because I don't have my back office permission. I've added that. So in flight logs, we can modify an unlocked flight by hitting the edit flight button. And we can review those revisions as I mentioned. And there's an emphasis here on unlocked because treasurers will have the opportunity to lock flights. And we do expect that any users can review the revision history of any flight. That might need to just have an update on the software as a bug was detected during this demo. Just a quick gap close here on the variable release heights. So we can still see that in our landing list, we have this release height modal. Now, any user on the field can interact with this release height modal to record the landing. But if that is set um, or it's missed by day, then only those with the edit flight log permission can modify this incomplete record. So it's highlighted in this orange color. And if you have edit flight permissions, You can edit the flight and define a release height, 3,700 feet, and submit changes. So it's going to give you this change summary, and we can hit confirm there. And if we actually clicked back into this flight, we can see the revision log here that my user changed the release height and that impacted the launch cost. So that's kind of important. The defining launch heights from the edit flight summary can only be done by those that have the edit flight permission or the admin permission, whereas flights going through launches and landings can be done by other users that might hear the radio call. There is some built-in functionality if the two people try to log a release height that is different. They'll get a warning. The latest person to hit submit will get a warning that they're overwriting. But it's intended to be fairly democratic unless you want to implement a rule on the field, part of your culture around maintaining a specific timekeeper to be recording launches and landings, release heights, or if that becomes a tow pilot responsibility once they get out of the tow aircraft. This demo. Okay, so now really into the admin functions. These do require the admin permission, and we're going to go into the accounting admin menu item. So for accounting adjustments, if you wanted to write down your intro AP by some value based on good accounting practices, you could write down that liability account, expecting that not all of your intro flights will be redeemed. And when you submit the adjustment there, let's actually just make an adjustment, $50. Do you want to write down the intro account payable? This will reduce the value of the intro AP account by $50. So we're going to hit submit. You can define other class fees, so flat rate overtime, social storage fees. It's very easy to remove the fees from going forward, application to different members, or add a new fee, bucket hats, and be able to bill members' accounts for some of those incidental charges. The transaction lock date is very important. So because flights can be edited, you want to avoid the risk that a member would go back many years of flight records, change a flight in their favor to add more money to their account today, and then introduce discrepancies through your accounting reconciliation. So once you reconcile an accounting period, whether that's last quarter or last month or last week, however frequently you're reconciling your books, you may choose to, and we would suggest it's a good practice to lock the transactions um, from the final date of your reconciliation. When you hit the lock transactions button, you're going to get a healthy warning here. By confirming this request, you acknowledge that the modifications to any record on or before December 31st, 2023 will not be possible. Managing corrections before the lock date will need to be done through adjustments to user accounts and requests for database modifications and billed at $50 per modification. This action cannot be undone. Do you want to update the transaction lock date? And this adds an attribute to all those transactions so they can no longer be editable. Also in the accounting admin, you can define your standard expiration period for intros. This just makes issuing intros easier if you wanted to do that. And you could set that expiration as you see fit. There is some functionality also to manage intros. We expect that intros will be issued, redeemed, refunded, or canceled. So I'm just going to go back to home, and this functionality at this time lives under the admin screen. So in expired intros, and I should maybe note this, is that when you are requesting a flight, for instance, and you're going to fly an intro, um, if the intro has expired, it will show up as yellow here to highlight to the flight line that this is a potentially expired intro, and the club can make a decision if they want to honor it or not. Maybe also highlighting that I have insufficient funds to go flying by myself, but I can still take an intro flying because we want to be able to make sure that the guests are being served, even if my account's not in great standing after a day of flying. So yeah, if an intro is expired, it will highlight in yellow here. And then in admin here, you can do two other things. You can refund an intro. So if we wanted to refund our intro to Garth Brooks for $155, or a different amount that's editable, and you can define the payment method and you can record the transaction reference and who you refunded it to. When you submit this refund, you're going to get a message here: by submitting this refund request, this flight will not be searchable to be redeemed, and the intro account payable account will be reduced by the refunded amount. And they wants you to confirm that you want to refund this intro to Garth Brooks for $155. So you can do that. Alternatively, so if yeah, you made a sale and someone moved and you wanted to be a good neighbor and refund the intro, you could do that. Um, you can also cancel intro. So if you had a bad actor or someone was saying, whatever the case may be, Garth Brooks, for instance, um, here you can cancel the intro with an opportunity to write if it was previously written down. So by canceling this intro, after submitting this intro request, this cancel or to this request to cancel this intro will no longer be searchable to be redeemed. This intro was not previously written down, so the liability account for the flights will be reduced by the amount originally paid. And then you can confirm if you want to cancel this intro to Garth Brooks. Now, if this was an expired intro, and you'll have the expired intros will all come to the top here if there are any, and you can click on them and hit cancel and click on them and hit cancel. So if you wanted to write those down as they expire, you can do that easily. In this case, we have an intro that's not expired. And we can, if we previously wrote it down, we want to select it so we don't doubly reduce the intro liability. Um, so anyways, that the idea here is that you can delete, you can remove expired intros, or at your discretion, you can cancel intros and you can choose whether or not you need to write down the intro liability. If it was done separately previously, or if you're doing it through this module, you can write down your intro liability. But I think that really goes over how you issue an intro, how you redeem an intro through requesting a flight and grabbing that intro, refunding an intro for someone that you want to honor their request to refund the intro, and cancel the intro, whether it's expired or at your own discretion. And that should let you manage all of your intro functions from within Take Up Slack. And I should say without any additional trackers. Some of the main value of Take Up Slack really comes down to the visibility provided to treasurers. So we're just going to back out here a little bit, get a little bit wider of our screen. And we're going to go into now accounting charts. So there are some drill downs from various accounts, and we're going to start with the cash in. So if you received your report from Venmo, for instance, and we have $735 in Venmo debits, so cash in, here we can drill down and see what those were for. So we had two intros, and then two members paid by intro. But you can match those payments and dates for when the Venmo transaction was if you needed to reconcile that account. Similar for e-transfers, the date that it occurred, the member that incurred the cost, and the amount of the intro, and the accumulating balance for this payment type through the accounting period, which is something that you can set. Sales tax also lets you drill down by the two different taxes, and you can see debits and credits as applied to intro flights, as applied to launches, as applied to glider rentals, based on the configuration of the glider, the launch, and the intro, being tax exempt, tax inclusive, or tax exclusive. Really critical here is starting balance, debits, credits, ending balance for updating your accounts on your accounting software, and then the opportunity to drill down into transaction specific level information in the event of an audit or audit committee or any investigation that you might want to do. Other revenue would also have revenue accounts, and those are going to be the oxygen fills, bucket hats, storage, membership fees, things like that that you want, barbecues, those kinds of social events, those kinds of things that you want to define in the account. I might actually, just for argument's sake here, apply a couple of those to a couple people's accounts. So let's say that Alexander Schleicher bought a bucket hat for 35 bucks and it includes GST and I get charged for a barbecue. So it's, 30, 45 bucks. It's a lot expensive barbecue. Canada Day, BBQ, submit. And then we have, let's do one more. Casey, I was also at the barbecue, and he probably got a better deal than me. And it was and we'll do one more. That's fine. I think that should be good. Okay, so if we jump back in, a little bit all over the place here. Apologies for that. Accounting charts now, and we see other revenue. We've got $100 of other revenue incurred. We can filter by bucket hats to see the Schleicher purchase, and we can filter by social to see the barbecues. And if we had numbers of barbecues, we can use the search to find the specific references based on the note. You'll notice the value here, 23.81 for Casey. That's $25 including tax. So if we went into the sales tax account payable and GST, we should see the $1.19 of GST that applied to the barbecue. So the counting is done as a consequence of recording the activity. So when Casey buys a barbecue, the tax, the counts, the implications are split out automatically, which should make um, reconciling your tow revenue, starting balance, and debits, credits, ending balance, your rental revenue, same idea, very easy for you to reconcile and have great visibility at a moment's notice. One thing I actually overlooked in the original run through, so I'm going to squeeze this in, fix it in post, as they say. In accounting charts, a critical drill down is the member account here. So if we get into this, and then want to see any of these specific users, we have the starting balance, debits, credits, ending balance. But let's have a look here at Alexander Schleicher. So today they had that initial Venmo deposit of $280. This is a hookup and go charge with uh, like $12 to connect and not very much per extra height gained. We have the glider rental in that glider, and there was an expense we charged them the bucket hat. So this is variable by date range and can give the treasurer a really quick look at the various charges and deposits that have impacted a member's account. A couple here that just go direct to transaction. So our intro revenue, just have a issue there on pulling that report. So we'll just have to get that fixed up real quick. But that would show you the sale of the intros and the redemption of the intros and any cancellations or refunds. Total revenue here, similar idea. Having some issues with pulling that report today, unfortunately. And rental revenue, same idea. So just have to get those fixed up, but that should be a quick fix in no time. The last thing we just want to go over here is how to get your data out of Take Up Slack. And so if we go back into the admin here, there's the exports at the bottom. So here you can define the date range, whether it's a year, a quarter, what have you. Export based on flights that, including those that weren't ultimately taken. Completed flights is probably more important operationally. A record of all transactions, and then you can load the data for export based on the date range that you select. It'll just pull that query and then give you the opportunity to download your exported data. And that's going to come out in a comma separated value file, a .csv. We actually use that report on your behalf to prepare the summary report and also identifies how many flights you're using for Take Up Slack, which defines kind of our billing tiers. And I'm just going to quickly flip over to show you what that report starts to look like over years of using Take Up Slack. So this is the report for the gliding club where Chris Casey and I fly the QNIM gliding club. In the 2023 to 2024 flying year. So our flying year is April 1 to March 31st. We have this number of unique pods, average flights per pilot, tow plane information. We can see how flights accumulated through the year. So green is instructional flights. Red is solo flights. There's a contest right in there. We can see the share of flights by flight type. And this is how many PIC launches did members take. So we had close to 30 members flying 0 to 10 times as PIC and a couple members flying between 100 and 105 times as PIC. Just to give you an idea about trying to get more pilots flying more frequently, which can be helpful for a safe operation. We have the student, the names have been removed here that did the most flights, the instructor that did the most instructional tows, the solo pilot that launched the most times, the tow pilot did the most tows, and the glider that was most productive, which of course was our K-21. And then the gliders have the launch numbers. These are club gliders, and then the average duration. And as you start to have data over time, you can start to see how your flight count changes by year, how your share of flights changes by year, and then if a nominal basis, which flight types have more or less year by year, and glider popularity year by year. Again, a nominal graph. So this is the kind of snapshot that we'll provide to take up slack using clubs based on that data export. But if you needed that data to submit for an audit or for your own records and not want to rely on our storage of it, it's available to users at any time. And that I think is the gist of Take Up Slack. I think that's my last one. So hopefully it's piqued your interest. We do really believe that it can definitely lighten the load, especially for treasurers, by providing more immediate self-serve opportunities, some accuracy, a lot of convenience, and we feel though it's priced quite right for gliding clubs, which are obviously cost-conscious organizations, many nonprofits. But we feel we hope it's sufficiently flexible to define your operation and capture that activity in real time on a single entry basis. So if your club right now fills out a timesheet and that timesheet goes to the treasurer and they take that timesheet and put it into some kind of tracking tool, an Excel tool or some other custom tool. And then that turns into invoices on a monthly basis or some period of time. You can move from that, what I would say is fairly cumbersome process, to a situation where defining the crew and putting them in a glider, recording a launching and landing, does all of the accounting on the back end, and members are provided the opportunity for self-service on their account, prompts for to encourage payment at the right times before it's too late, and visibility for the treasurer and for members at any time. So hopefully you'll agree that this could make life at the Gliding Club a lot easier, so you can focus on going flying instead of focusing on managing the club. And if you have more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I think you can find our contact information on lots of places, including our website for Proving Grounds at soaringtasks.com, on the Contact Us page, or on takeupslack.com. There's a prompt to reach out by email. So hopefully we'll hear from you soon, and happy to go through a one-on-one demonstration and very happy to help with a webinar to your members if you decide to integrate it. The cultural shift is probably the hardest part, but once it's up and running, it's a dream for users and especially administrators and treasurers. So hopefully we can prove that to be true, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future. So thanks very much for your time.